A disastrous accident and a tragic death
It's unbearable.
leads to a lengthy trial with a shocking conclusion.
It was a big sucker punch.
And those responsible walking free.
The judge had moved on.
Peter Ackman investigates a judicial system where some guilty remain unpunished.
His lawyer appealed on the grounds that the trial had taken too long.
Court cases are left unfinished.
It's unacceptable.
And the painful consequences
You're left with no answers.
Absolutely.
of justice denied.
I just want somebody to say, well, it's their fault.
And a beloved family pet struck with cancer
One day I came home and he just did not even get up.
is helping doctors take a new look at treatment
When dogs share the same disease, why not study them?
to save our four-legged friends.
I'm tired of losing dogs to cancer.
Sandy Rinaldo investigates the innovative and promising research
60% of all golden retrievers will get cancer at some point in their lives.
of a groundbreaking canine cancer study that could lead to new cures for humans
She's had all the chemo. Do you have anything? I said, well, I think we do.
and turn lost hope into new life.
I'm living proof it saved me.
Here is Kevin Newman.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. There is a crisis of justice in Canada. Log jams are denying people their time in court. And when their cases can't be heard, people accused of rape, abuse, and cons are being let go. It's happening right across the country in cases big and small. And as W5's Peter Ackman discovered, it is smearing Canada's international reputation for fairness.
Tucked away in their tiny home on the outskirts of Doncaster, England, Ken and Sue Johnson have been trapped in emotional and legal limbo ever since they got the call that their only child had been killed.
What was that day like?
A blur. A bit as if you were having a nightmare and you'd woke up and you'd thought, oh, it's just a nightmare. It's unbearable. We need to get justice for him.
For his entire life, Scott Johnson loved music. For years, he did everything he could to be part of that scene. Eventually landing a gig, setting up drum kits for one of the biggest rock bands in the world, three-time Grammy Award-winning group, Radiohead. But on June 16, 2012, that dream job became a nightmare. Scott was setting up for Radiohead's final concert of their tour in Toronto. Then just before soundcheck, disaster.
We went over to the stage. We could see that the stage was buckled in.
A scene of twisted metal, devastation. Philip Selway, Radiohead's drummer, rushed towards the mangled stage, but at that moment he had no idea Scott, his drum technician, was underneath it all, killed instantly.
It was a big sucker punch to all of us.
Since that moment, Selway and Scott's parents have been there for each other.
You could have been sitting where Scott was sitting?
Yes, always that sense that actually, yes, we should have been there at that point. So yes, survivor's guilt, whatever it is a strong feeling.
6 years after losing Scott, Ken and Sue can't even imagine a day when they aren't in mourning.
I think you don't realise how much you love somebody till you ain't got them anymore. I mean, he knew I loved him.
Yeah.
You're waiting for him to come home.
Yeah. Excuse me.
The Johnsons wanted answers. It took a year for the provincial investigation to be completed, eventually concluding there had been 5 Ontario regulation violations, and found the overall weight capacity of the stage roof had been miscalculated by over 16,000 pounds. Finally, in 2013, a total of 13 charges were laid against the promoter, Live Nation, the staging company, Optech Staging, and the engineer, Dominic Cugliari, under Ontario's Occupational Health and Safety Act.
So what I'm hearing is that the police did an excellent job. The Crown did their job.
It shifts then to the judicial system, and that was a surprise for us.
Those surprises came in the court delays. It took a full year just to set the first trial date. Despite it all, Ken was ready. He bought a plane ticket to Canada, wanting to witness justice firsthand.
It was supposed to be 2 blocks of 3 weeks, but the first 3 weeks got cancelled, so that was my first flight cancelled.
Then, not until 18 months later, in November 2015, did the trial get underway, but not the way it was planned.
And then it got spread 2 days here, 3 days there, over the next 18 months.
Over that time, more trial dates were set, then abandoned.
There was a frustration as the case went on, but there was always that belief that actually justice would be done in there in some way.
And then, on top of all the court delays and frustrations, a shocking twist.
It was announced a couple of weeks before the last 3 days in June that the judge had moved on. And that, to us, was devastating.
That's because it triggered a mistrial. The trial judge had been promoted to a higher court and wouldn't finish the case. Ontario Judge Ann Nelson eventually took over, but ordered a stay of proceedings, which basically means the case was thrown out. She wrote, "The breach of the defendant's rights signals a failure on the part of the administration of justice and impairs the reputation of our justice system."
The judge's ruling was based on a precedent-setting Supreme Court case from 2016 known as the Jordan decision, which sets strict time limits for bringing cases to trial. 30 months for more serious crimes in Superior Court, 18 months in Provincial Court, which means the trial for the death of Scott Johnson should have taken no more than a year and a half. Instead, it lasted nearly 5 years.
There were some serious errors.
Yeah.
Serious errors, obvious errors.
But you're not out for blood, you're not out for money.
No.
You just want...
I just want somebody to say, well, it's their fault.
And yet, this case got stayed and you're left with no result.
Exactly.
And no justice for Scott.
Yeah.
He deserves it.
We were flabbergasted. We were angry. We were completely baffled by the decision. It didn't add up for us.
You're left with no answers.
Absolutely. It was the worst possible outcome at that point.
During all that time, angry and frustrated, Radiohead boycotted touring in Toronto. Until 2018, when they came back with a message demanding justice for Scott.
The people who should be held accountable are still not being held accountable in your system. The silence is f***ing deafening. Thank you.
It was tough coming back, and it was very emotional.
You needed it to be said.
Yes, yeah. Having that opportunity to come back to Toronto and to be able to say that, it was a very important platform for us.
Retired Chief Justice Neil Whitman of Alberta's Court of Queen's Bench reviewed the Radiohead case for W5.
There were issues with judges being moved up and moved on and gaps in the system. Eventually, it was stayed.
One of the problems was the appointment of the Ontario Court of Justice judge, that is the provincial court in Ontario, being appointed to the Superior Court in Ontario.
That appointment was made by the then Federal Justice Minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Why wasn't that judge able to perform his duties? Why wasn't he able to finish the last 3 days before moving up to Superior Court?
Individual circumstances, judges being appointed that determine the necessity of them stopping what it is that they do because of that appointment or the elevation.
Was he told by Justice to
put your pen down and...
When there are appointments made to the bench or elevations, then that individual has to and does report to the Chief Justice.
So yes, he has to stop?
Yeah.
That's not always the case. In the interest of justice, that practice has not been followed in Alberta.
I always instructed them to finish their cases in provincial court. That is after they were sworn in as a Superior Court justice.
But it seems like a problem that can be fixed.
That took some doing in the provincial court here, but it should be done.
The Scott Johnson case isn't the only one where justice was denied. Hundreds of others have been declared unconstitutional because of long delays, many due to a shortage of judges, prosecutors, and even courtrooms. Jody Wilson-Raybould was Canada's Justice Minister until 3 weeks ago. She says the government takes court delays seriously.
July of 2016, when the Jordan decision came down from the Supreme Court of Canada, it was an absolute wake-up call for me. We have to do better.
So do these delays and these cases that are stayed, do they undermine the justice system?
A serious case was stayed where the family of the victim feel that they, and rightfully so, haven't received justice or haven't received answers. I have the greatest empathy for that.
But empathy isn't what Ken and Sue Johnson need or want. You wanted a decision one way or another, you just wanted a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needed to be complete.
You know, if they broke laws, they broke laws.
In July of 2016, the Supreme Court put Canada on notice. The justice system had lost its way, noting a pervasive culture of complacency throughout. The precedent-setting Jordan decision immediately set strict time limits on trying criminal cases, concluding timely trials are important, reaffirming that justice delayed is justice denied. But more than 2 years later, some judges say little has changed for the better.
If our court is not provided with the necessary space, then the entire justice system is hampered, chipping away at the public's confidence in this essential institution of our democracy.
Speaking at the 2018 opening session of the Ontario Courts, Superior Court Chief Justice Heather Smith was blunt. More federally appointed judges are desperately needed right away.
We can only do so much when 21 judicial vacancies, approaching nearly 10% of our full-time judicial complement, are left vacant for months on end.
In fact, these same issues are found in most provinces. Alberta's Court of Queen's Bench Chief Justice Mary Morrow says the situation there keeps her awake at night.
We have cases that are unfortunately booked long trials, that is trials over 5 days in Edmonton and Calgary, 3 to 4 years from now. It's unacceptable.
Those unacceptable delays have consequences.
Do you think there's a time when you'll stop thinking about it?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Byron Rattan tries, but he can't forget. The 51-year-old's demons are buried deep inside.
Nightmares and stuff like that.
What happens in your nightmares?
Just reliving it over and over. Well, it's hard to get feelings out anymore.
Those feelings of pain and sadness have been tearing at him for most of his life.
I don't know if we'll ever get over it, but medication seems to help.
When Byron was just 12 years old, he was raped.
Started rubbing up against my body and shit like that. He's a sick man.
What did he tell you after?
That it was our secret and that I couldn't tell anybody.
That first brutal assault silenced the schoolboy.
Where did it happen?
First time, it happened in his dorm room.
A dorm room here at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario.
Do you wish you told your mom after it happened the first time?
Yeah. Things might have turned out different.
He never told his mother because his rapist was 26-year-old Kenneth Gavin Williamson, Byron's court-appointed mentor. The two were placed together by Child Services after Byron was caught skipping school and stealing money from his mother.
And she threatened me to take me down to the police station. And then she did.
She tried to scare you?
Yeah.
Scared, ashamed, and silent, Byron was raped at least 49 more times over the next year. A shocking secret he would hold inside for 3 decades, until 2008, when his terrible truth spilled out.
The probation officer, she asked me why I was on my medication, and I told her, and then she said she picked up the phone right away and she called the police.
How do you feel about that?
There's no way that you're gonna find this guy even guilty, because he's not gonna say anything.
Just 3 months later, Williamson was arrested, and surprisingly, he did talk, but only admitting to investigators to mutual masturbation and oral sex with Byron. Enough to charge him with buggery, indecent assault, and gross indecency.
Like I say, nothing's too bad for that guy.
For the first time he can remember, Byron was hopeful there'd be justice, but he'd have to wait. November 2009, the first preliminary hearing canceled. The Crown believed the judge was not available. Rescheduled to February 2010, but another mix-up caused another cancellation. Then in May of that year, a one-day preliminary inquiry was completed. But with no earlier trial dates available, there were more than 18 months of delays. Finally, in December of 2011, the 7-day trial begins.
How hard was it to testify?
It was pretty hard.
They found you credible?
Yeah.
It took the jury less than 6 hours to find Williamson guilty on all counts.
That win was short-lived. Williamson was sentenced to 4 years, but he would never spend a single day in prison. His lawyer appealed on the grounds that the trial had taken too long. And while the Supreme Court agreed with a previous ruling that his crimes were despicable, it called the trial delays unreasonable and concluded that timely justice is one of the hallmarks of a free and democratic society.
They came back that he had a stay, and I said, what the hell does a stay mean? And they said, well, they threw it out because it took too long. I was like,
So he got his stay, and that means your case went away.
well, more or less. He was still found guilty, though.
So he was found guilty. He didn't go to prison.
No. He never even spent an hour in jail.
Someone would look at that and wonder whether that brought the administration of justice into disrepute. Because if the person was guilty, how can it be that the charge simply gets thrown out?
Michael Lacey is the president of Canada's Criminal Lawyers Association. He stands by the fact that a timely trial is an important constitutional right.
You know, everyone has that right to be tried within a reasonable period of time, and that's unfortunately one of those examples where a guilty person, as found by the judge or jury in that case, effectively goes free because they had a constitutional right to be tried within a reasonable period of time.
And when a case is stayed and a victim doesn't see anything happen to their case except it stop, who should they blame?
Those people who are affected by the alleged crime can look to the state and look to the government to say, look, why couldn't you accommodate getting this trial on within 30 months? And really the buck stops there.
I don't think that the, quote, justice system is high on the priority list.
Retired Alberta Chief Justice Neil Whitman says the government's priority should be hiring more judges.
There's no extra judges, I think, and what's particularly frustrating is filling vacancies on the court.
There are currently dozens of federally appointed judicial vacancies. From coast to coast to coast, there are open positions. And while many candidates have been vetted and recommended to fill those jobs, still, they sit empty.
I'd like to know how much time is actually spent by whom to make an appointment, because there's been vacancies in some jurisdictions for a long, long time.
Signing off on the appointments of federal judges happens here at the office of the Justice Minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould was Minister of Justice until January 14th.
There are a significant number of judicial vacancies right now, right across the country. Why aren't they being filled?
I have been moving very consistently in making appointments. 200 of those appointments have happened in the last 2 years.
The Commissioner of Judicial Affairs lists 41 applicants right now that are highly recommended.
If somebody is highly recommended, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is a free pass to become a judge. So I want to make sure that we get it right. And I'm incredibly proud of the many candidates that we've appointed in every jurisdiction across the country.
To quote Nike, just do it. If you lose a player, you put another one out in the field. You don't go short. We're going short.
Wilson-Raybould admits going short is part of the problem.
This has been pointed to as an element that has contributed toward delays or towards having certain cases stayed.
And what about Byron Rattan? Justice for him was denied because of a series of avoidable delays.
That case was stayed. Many reasons, many delays. Was that a blot on the Canadian justice system?
It is incredibly unfortunate, to say the least. I'm fairly confident that Mr. Rattan does not feel that justice was achieved.
Or the neighbors who live next to this person that was found guilty of buggery and raping a child? How do anyone in the community around this man feel like justice was done?
Well, there's nothing I can say to change the way those individuals feel and the horrible reality of what they had to face. What I can do is ensure and commit to doing everything I can to make sure that such a horrible circumstance doesn't happen again.
That commitment comes too late for Byron Rattan. His abuser is free, while he remains imprisoned in the mental trauma of all those rapes.
Everything that happened to me, and it pisses me off because I don't want to live that shit anymore.
Well, one quick update to Peter's story. The Prime Minister appointed a new Justice Minister shortly after our interview, David Lametti, and he has 57 positions for federally appointed judges to fill.